Hey everybody, my name's Dave. And before I get started, I bet you're wondering, Dave, how long have you been growing that sweet beard? Well, I actually have a question for you I'd like to start with. Have you ever done something really stupid? You know, like one of those decisions that seemed like a good idea at the time, but when all is said and done, you realize it wasn't as great of an idea as you thought. You may not be surprised to hear that I actually have a story to tell about some time I did something dumb. See, I was 11 years old and I just gotten a new bike. And my brother had a bike and all the kids in the neighborhood, we had these sweet bikes and we would ride them. And one of the places we would ride was in our parents' backyard. We had this really nice hill. You could just bomb down this hill. You get some speed. Now, one day we went in the garage and found a couple of 2x4s and a piece of plywood. You probably know where this is going. We built an amazing ramp. Now this ramp was amazing. You would hit it and it felt like you were flying. It was awesome and everything went great until one day we decided, what would happen if we got a water hose and added some mud to this perfectly good landing area? So that's what we did. You probably know where this is headed, but I didn't. So I get to the top of the hill, not even thinking twice about what could go wrong. And I start bombing, I'm picking up speed, and I hit that ramp, and again, I am flying. Unfortunately, the landing area was mud, which is not a good idea. As soon as my tires hit the ground, my bike wiped out from under me. I went head over heels down the side of this hill, scratching the whole left side of my body. It was a mess. Now, you probably heard me tell that story and thought, wow, how'd you not see that coming? And honestly, I should have. But I didn't take the time to think about the choice I was making. And I mean, if I really think about it, I realize it probably wasn't a good choice. But here's the thing, we all struggle with making wise choices. Every single day we're faced with decisions. And we can either make the wise choice, the one that probably know is the best for us, or the unwise choice, the one that probably isn't the best. Maybe you stayed up all night playing Fortnite, even though you had a basketball game early the next morning. Or maybe you tried to show your friends that you actually could drink an entire gallon of milk without throwing up. Wouldn't do that one, that's a rough one. Or maybe you lied to your parents about the guy you were texting or the party you were going to so that you could see that girl. Whatever the choice, chances are you probably did it without even considering the consequences. Or maybe you knew it wasn't wise, but you chose to do it anyway. Why? Because the truth is, making wise choices just isn't always easy. I mean, think about it. Every day you have to decide whether you're gonna honor and respect your parents or talk back to them and break the rules. You have to decide if you're gonna try to do your best on a math assignment or just scribble something down at the last second. You have to decide if you're gonna stick up for that kid getting picked on during gym class or mock him just like everybody else does. And sometimes we make the wise choice. We do the thing we know is right and best for us in the moment, but other times we don't. But here's what I've found to be true anytime we make the unwise choice. We don't always consider the consequences. Now, talking back to your parents or breaking their rules will eventually lead to a punishment or damaging trust in your relationship. Breezing through your homework, it might get you enough to complete the assignment, but it's not gonna help you pass the class at the end of the semester. And making fun of somebody else, well, that might seem like the funny or popular thing to do at the time, but in the long run, it's extremely hurtful to both you and the person you're teasing. You see, every choice, it has a consequence. And sooner or later, the consequences of those unwise choices will catch up to you. Now you might be thinking, sure, that might be true, but why do I need to be worried about that right now? All I'm worried about right now is right now, and I get it. But whether you realize it or not, the choices we make today can have a huge impact on our lives tomorrow. But that doesn't change the fact that making wise choices right now is hard. So, what are we supposed to do? How can we begin making wise choices in big ways, in small ways, even when it's a really hard thing to do? Well, luckily, we aren't the first people who have dealt with having to make wise choices. In fact, there's a letter in the Bible that talks about this exact thing. It's called Galatians, and it's a letter by a guy known as the Apostle Paul. He wrote to a group of people in a place called Galatia. Now, Paul became a Christian a few years after Jesus was crucified and rose from the dead. And when he started following Jesus, Paul was all in. I mean, he eventually started several churches, including a few in the area called Galatia. Paul really cared about the people there and wanted to make sure they were pursuing the right goals. That's why he wrote them the letter we're going to look at today. In Galatians chapter 6, Paul talked to them specifically about, you guessed it, making wise choices. Here's what he had to say. You will always harvest what you plant. Okay, let's stop here for a second. And Paul wasn't talking about actually planting here because that would be weird and like oddly specific advice, right? But he was using it as an illustration to teach the Galatians about the choices they were making. Now, in case you haven't spent much time in a garden lately, let me break this down for you. Let's suppose that I want to grow some corn. Now, I've got this right here. If I wanted to grow corn, what type of seed would you guess I would choose? Corn, yep, you got it. Corn. That's how you grow corn. Now, if I didn't want corn, let's say I wanted to grow some beans, well, in that case, I would need to plant beans. just like that. I actually one time did grow sunflower. Unfortunately, it grew too tall and fell over and died. So I'm not much of a gardener, but I did grow sunflower from a sunflower seed, just like we're talking about. Now, and it wouldn't make sense for anything else to have grown. You plant one thing and expect something different to grow, that's crazy. You have to plant the seeds now for what you want to see grow later. Now, we may not be expert gardeners, but we're all planting seeds every single day with the choices we make. I mean, think about that. Every decision that you make today is gonna grow or harvest something into our lives later. When we make wise choices, we're planting seeds that have the potential to grow into something great in our lives. But when we make unwise choices, we're planting seeds that have the potential to grow into things that aren't so great. That's why making wise choices now is so important for our lives. I mean, not just for today, but for tomorrow and beyond. The truth is, if we want good things to grow in our lives later, we have to start planting the seeds for them by making wise choices now. In other words, the goal is to live with the end in mind. Now, why is this so important? Well, look at what Paul said next. Those who live only to satisfy their own sinful nature will harvest decay and death from that sinful nature. But those who live to please the Spirit will harvest everlasting life from the Spirit. Harsh, right? But that's how serious Paul was about making sure the Galatians understood the consequences of their choices. Now, to help us understand this a little better, let's go back to our garden. You remember the one with the corn and the beans? The one without the sunflower? But what we see is that if we plant selfish desires, or if we choose to plant sin, or just if we choose to plant unwise choices with the decisions that we make, what's gonna grow in our lives? According to Paul, nothing good. Eventually, we're just gonna harvest the consequences that have the potential to destroy parts of our lives, our relationships, and even our futures. And this is why, you guys, the next part, it's so important. Because Paul also pointed out that when we do good, and when we make wise choices, those that the Spirit of God leads us to make, we're gonna harvest amazing things. When we believe in Jesus and dedicate our lives to following Him, we're planting seeds in our lives and in others' lives that will one day lead to the greatest gift, eternity with Jesus. The goal is to live with the end in mind. And if you ask me, this is a pretty great end to keep in mind. Now, I need to stop here and say that I realize that simply knowing this is true doesn't mean it's suddenly gonna get easier to make all the wise choices. It doesn't make caring about our future more than we care about what's happening right now any easier. And honestly, it doesn't change the fact that we live in a world full of things like death and sin and heartbreak and loss. Because of that, sometimes we can plant all the right things in our lives here on earth and still experience the pain that comes from circumstances beyond our control. In other words, sometimes the harvest is gonna be hard to see. But that's what makes our belief in Jesus so much more important. Because when we believe in Him, we know that we'll eventually see the harvest of all of our wise choices one day in heaven. I really believe that that's true. It's one of the reasons I keep trying to sow good things in my own life, because I believe that no matter what, one day I'm going to reap the benefit of it. I trust God with that. But I also know that even though we know that, it doesn't necessarily make it easier to make the wise choices right now. And Paul knew that too. That's why he offered this final bit of encouragement. So let's not get tired of doing what is good. At just the right time, we will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up. Therefore, whenever we have the opportunity, we should do good to everyone, especially to those in the family of faith. I love this part. Paul's basically saying, keep going. Don't give up, because the good stuff is coming. He's giving us a pep talk. We may not know exactly how or when it will show up, but we can trust that when we're sowing the right things, God will eventually reward us with a harvest of great things, either here on earth or in heaven. Maybe you're planting seeds right now by making wise choices, but you feel like you haven't seen anything good come from it yet. You're studying hard, you're saying no to the things you know you shouldn't do. Maybe you've chosen a new circle of friends who are better influences on your life, and right now it just feels difficult. You're wondering, when's the good stuff gonna come? And if that's you, don't give up. Just like Paul said, if you keep doing good and making wise choices now, your harvest is coming. And I promise you, even if you can't see it yet, it's going to be worth it. Remember, our goal is to live with the end in mind. The goal is to make wise choices that will lead to growth of great things in our lives over time. And the goal is to remember that even if we don't see the good things growing right now, God sees, God notices, and God's gonna make everything right in the end. But what does that mean for us today? Well, for starters, I think we all have to take a look at the seeds we're planting in our lives right now. Are we making unwise choices? Are we planting seeds of distrust by gossiping about people behind their back? Are you planting seeds of laziness by skipping out on practice or not devoting time to your homework? Are you planting seeds of disrespect by lying to your parents or talking back to them? Are you planting seeds that are going to threaten the sexual integrity of your relationships by making unwise choices with your current boyfriend or girlfriend? No matter who we are, we all can identify one area of our lives where the seeds we're planting now may not be growing the best things in our lives. And once we know where we need help planting better seeds, we can ask God for the wisdom, strength, and encouragement to start making better choices. And think of it this way. One day you're gonna look back at the choices you made in this phase of your life, and you're gonna think one of two things. You're either gonna think, I'm glad I did, or I wish I had. So look at the things in your life right now, the choices you're making, and ask yourself, which ones would I put in the first category and which ones would I put in the second? Which ones would make me say, I'm glad I did? And then what are the ones that might make me say, I wish I had? My prayer for all of you today is that you'll start making wise choices now so that you can look back and be proud of the things that have grown in your life as a result. Remember, the goal is to live with the end in mind. And the end I want for all of you is the life that Jesus promises us. So as you head out today, I want you to think about this question. What is one reason making wise choices is sometimes hard for me? Over a year. That's how long I've been growing this sweet beard. Anyway, see you later.